Back at it.
What's going on, man?
No, not much. Missing the big gig tonight. Apartment 213, Chronologia, sold out in Cleveland. Got a chance. Shout out to my friends playing Thou Shalt Not tonight.
Should
be a fun gig. Don's band, yeah.
Okay.
Should be a good one. Barn Burner 96. Good year. This is a strong year.
Yeah, it is. And I like the fact that we're also jumping all around and we're not going kind of in order because, I don't know, it's just something a little different. But
yeah, definitely. It keeps it a little interesting. But a lot of good ones. Had a lot of fun with this one. Aside from Black Acid Evil, it's been really fun. That's really fucking something, man.
Yeah. We should get into like the good stuff.
Yeah, I just want to get that out of the way now.
You want to get it out of the way?
That's an abortion of music.
Dude, that's complete garbage.
Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. It sounds like the shitty, like, if you put on a sci-fi movie in like 2002, what they play in like the background, that's pretty much what they're going with. Fuck that record, let's move on.
That album is like the equivalent of like early CGI that just looked completely fucking like in the Lawnmower Man, like how corny it looked. Like that, for me, I don't understand it. Like I get that he wanted to do something that's like a little more industrial, whatever. But when it's such a 180 from the first four albums, and then it sounded the way I remember buying that and listening to it, just thinking, I didn't know what the fuck it was.
I still don't.
Yeah, I don't understand it, and it's to me the worst album that he's ever released.
Yeah, I thought I was really into it for a while. I was like, maybe this isn't that bad. But then like the drugs wore off, and I was like, this is really fucking terrible.
Yeah, you came down off of.
I would rather listen to his colonoscopy than listen to that. But no, a lot of good stuff. A lot of good mainstream stuff, a lot of good underground stuff, a lot of different genres to get into. Really know where to start because this is kind of a chaotic year. There's so much
for me, 96, I'm a senior or junior in high school. And so there was a lot of stuff that was really influential, even still, for me.
Yeah.
And spent half the year still living in Portland, Oregon. The other half the year I was back here in this fucking shithole of a state.
My mom bought me Wu-Tang socks because I was into like Wu-Tang Clan and that kind of stuff. So a little bit differently from you, but
yeah, I mean, being in high school at that time, I mean, there was a lot of shit, mainstream shit that at that time that was still popular.
And we may as well get right into it. I mean, Pantera, Great Southern Trendkill comes out in '96.
Yeah,
I think that's one of their strongest releases. It's an awesome record, super heavy. Seth Putnam on guest vocals.
I think it's better than Far Beyond Driven. I've always felt that way.
You know what? I actually, Far Beyond Driven's really always been my favorite. I think it's number one on the Billboard for a reason at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more accessible, but I find myself when I listen to Trendkill, I have more fun listening. It is a stronger record. It's heavier.
No, it's heavier. It's more extreme. I remember being in Beaverton, Oregon, and walking into the Blockbuster Music out there, and I saw it. And that's actually, I think, the first time I listened to I Hate God.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was during around Far Beyond Driven era.
And I have them also on for '96 for Dope Sick too, which is
that's my favorite
seminal release.
But it is '96 because that's my favorite I Hate God album. And
really.
Yeah.
Over Take His Knee for Pain?
Yeah. Only because it's, it's one of those things where it's like the first I heard.
Yeah.
So therefore
it's a drenched in felt. You need a shower after that. Record.
I think you need a shower after any album you listen to.
That one especially with the Mike shattering the glass and cutting himself in the beginning. The whole record feels like you are just in the worst place in life for 30 minutes. So really, you can have a great day, get a raise at work, get laid, come home, put that record on, and be like, it's fucking all for shit.
Shotgun in the mouth, no big deal. But man, I remember listening to when that Great Southern Trendkill, and I think at the time it wasn't actually out yet, but they had like a promo of it, and I had to, like, I put it in, at the listening station, and it was fucking, dude, the first song.
Yeah.
It just like literally melted the flesh off my face.
Starts off strong. Even
Extreme
the
as
singles.
hell.
Flood's a single off that record, or Drag the Waters was a single.
Drag the Waters. That I played in my high school class in Portland because we had to do a choose a song and then talk about the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in our English class. The English teacher was a fucking fat goblin. I hated that bitch. And she, not getting into it, she fucking like, I gave her a report one time and she fucking threw it, like I know the bitch threw it away.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Barden, I think is what her name was. She threw it away and then said she never got it. And I was like, you fucking, anyway.
Right.
But yeah, Drag the Waters, I played in there. And thinking about how the way shit is now, there's no way that they'd let you play Drag the Waters.
Oh, absolutely not. Wouldn't happen.
You know, but I remember playing that and I was just sitting there like, yeah, it's the greatest shit ever. And everybody else in the class was like, this isn't that, you know, what is this? And,
yeah.
You know, but it probably is the most straightforward, accessible song.
Track on the record.
I mean, it is definitely a single.
You know, and it's weird because, you know, we haven't gone through a lot of, like, mainstream stuff. And I wanted to, you know, a segue with Pantera is, like, you know, for us, me with 96, I was 11. But when we were 12 and 13, we started getting more into extreme music and stuff like that. And Biello and I had, I talk about him a lot on the episodes. My friend Anthony Biello, we came together, played Severed Remains together when we were younger. Basically my friend I grew up with and came through this whole underground journey with when I was younger. We had the Ozfest 96 tape, the cassette tape, which we used to watch, the VHS tape, which we used to watch religiously all the time in his basement. And Neurosis through Silver and Blood on the Ozfest 96. Talk about a band that toured with Pantera that did. I mean, you saw it, you son of a bitch. And I'm jealous of you for a lot of things. Your physique, massive dong, but mostly seeing that. And it's like they must have blown. Even when they played Locust Star on Ozfest 96, like that whole album through Silver is a real experience. They never really topped it, in my opinion.
No, I think that's their peak, and I remember, you know, back in the day, just reading like Metal Mags and stuff.
The crowd after they played was like they had seen a ghost.
Yeah, I heard of them, but we saw them at the Jar Arena in Akron, and when they came out, I remember thinking that there were like 90 people on stage. You know, because the band is
Noah with a keyboard set up where he's like hitting it with his head. I was like, what the fuck is going on?
It was just. I remember telling my friends back then, you got seasick listening to it because the music was just waves, and I don't think that people got it, but nobody booed it. I remember people at the end of each song, everybody was just kind of like,
"The fuck is going on?"
Yeah, like, what is this? You know, and it was in a brutally heavy.
Yeah,
and definitely better than Clutch, which is the other opening band that.
I mean, it was a crazy year for a lot of that stuff. I mean, Typo Negative puts out October Rust, which, you know, I know you're a big fan of. I came to love later in my 20s, but it's like that's I think a pretty mainstream record for them too. I like it more than Bloody Kisses. It's a bit more accessible. It's a bit gothier. It's a bit more refined.
I would say I like it more too. I go back and forth, but I just think that the song selection on it and the way that it's put together, I think is a better album as a whole.
Yeah.
I think the thing that always makes it better for me than Bloody Kisses has those two versions where it's like the one version, which is just like, I think shorter.
People really kind of knew what they were doing.
That to me was like, that could have been their make or break album, and it definitely made that band big time. And I remember
it's a bold sound.
Buying that, I bought it when I lived in Portland, and again, another listening booth. I think it was at fucking Target. No, I never listened to it. It was at Target, and I was like, oh my god, the new album, and I bought it, and I listened to that thing religiously, and
yeah, it's a good album.
That is probably the number one, you know, on that list.
It's crazy because we talk about Neurosis, but it's like, you know, to get quickly through it, I mean, it's a big year for that sludgy stuff anyway. I mean, Broken Glass by Crowbar, which has my favorite Crowbar track, Nothing More, still my favorite tracks by them ever. Pagan Terrorism Attacks by Acid Bath. Acid Bath is one of those bands of the 90s. I mean, 96, you start to get that Manson kind of stuff gets big. Acid Bath was one of those bands for me I feel like should have been bigger than they were. You know, I know they had the tragedy with their member that died, but a lot of my friends in high school that liked Acid Bath weren't they weren't into death metal like we were. They weren't into grind. They weren't even really into punk. They catered to that kind of more slightly mainstream audience.
Yeah.
And they had really catchy tunes. That Dax had the vocal that you listen to his vocals and it's like, this band's gonna be, could be on the radio a little bit in the 90s, you know. And they had that sound I feel like should have really. It sounds a little dated. It sounds very 90s when you listen to it, but it sounds like it could have been a lot more popular than it was.
I still love both albums. I think, you know, again, it's another one where it's like, what day when I go back and forth. I mean, I think they're both right up there.
I could listen to either one interchangeably. You could throw either one on.
They're just incredible. And I do think that with the death in the band, that probably killed any chance of that. Because they broke up right after that. Right? I mean,
they never got right. They never, and to their credit, they've never gone back to it. They've never like cashed in and did the. But I mean, speaking of the Neurosis thing, like you know, their bass player in that '96 video had the Christ Driver shirt on, and Everything Burns. I got it still over there in the collection. I mean, that's an amazingly underrated sludgy industrial record. Christ Driver is god tier stuff from Seattle that is so. Again, like Neurosis had that kind of amoebics sound that mixed with punk and the slice, which the context for it I have now, but like as a younger kid listening to it, like what the fuck is this?
Mm-hmm.
It's just oppressive and heavy. Grief, Miserably Ever After, Wellington, Thank You Jesus, Nude Crush, Embraced by the Anti-Self. Those are all like really great sludge.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff we talked about on like a while ago on that sludge episode. And I know I'm gonna mention it because you mentioned the name where you said Manson. I don't give a shit what anybody says. I love Antichrist Superstar. I don't fucking care.
It was 96, right? Or 97?
Yes, 96. And that to me...
Big record, I mean...
I think it's a phenomenal album. I get why people don't like them. To me, it was like the fan base killed it with the Mansonites and all the, you know, the fucking morons that listen to that shit. But for me...
Yeah.
I think that was one of the most important. I put it up there with like Downward Spiral and things like that. It's one of the most important albums.
I hate to sound like this kind of guy, but it's like I think like where we went musically with extreme metal, I think that band just skipped me musically. And yeah, the social thing. I had a lot of friends like, but it's like by the time I already was into other stuff, the music didn't really interest me. So I didn't really get. Now it's funny. Now that I'm older, I like a lot of industrial music. I actually kind of don't mind Smells Like Children, and Antichrist has some. I like it. I appreciate it more now than I did then because at the time I was like, you know what I'm saying? Musically, I just went a different direction.
I liked Portrait back then, but I was kind of the same back then. It kind of got out of that. I didn't really listen to it as much, and it was a couple years later that I went back to it, especially with the song Tourniquet and stuff like that. That I think is just awesome. I think that they found it was like lightning in a bottle, and that
maybe the image overshadowed the music a lot too.
It did, and he was kind of like if you took Alice Cooper, updated it, and just made it way more evil. To me, that's what it reminded me of, and I have no problem saying that I listen to it, and it's like I see people here and there as time goes on go, yeah, it's a pretty cool album. It's like it's okay to say.
Hey man, like I said, I went back a couple of years ago and listened to like Smells Like Children. I found myself kind of enjoying it again because I like a lot more industrial music now.
No, you didn't get fucking nipple rings and wear fishnet.
I mean, what I do on Saturday nights is between me and Jesus, but but no, I do, but that's money well spent. But I mean, again, it's different like from mainstream stuff because a lot of other mainstream. We have Alice in Chains Unplugged, which we haven't really talked about live stuff a lot. We kind of shade away from live albums, but that to me is the greatest unplugged record of all time in '96. I think that Alice in Chains Unplugged is the best unplugged performance of all time. We all know I love Nirvana. I think there's the most significant, but Alice in Chains always sound the best. That's a great record.
To me, I think that. I love the Nirvana one, but the Alice in Chains one, I think just like it just translated better.
Those songs
are just better.
Yeah.
suited for Unplugged. And no, I agree. That was a great thing. It's hard to watch when you actually watch the video of it because
Lane's kind of out of it.
I mean, he's so frail.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
He's just, and knowing that he's that frail and yet he still brought it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. I mean, it's sad to think about. I mean, I love all the newer Alice in Chains stuff with William Duvall.
Yeah.
Sounds
great.
It's fine.
I think it's good.
Because to me, it's like as much as Lane is the voice of Alice in Chains, Jerry Cantrell was also the voice in a lot of ways, and
that makes sense.
The primary songwriter.
Yeah.
And so that sound, that feel, and half of that voice is still there.
The spirit is still kind of...
The spirit is still there to me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, and...
How'd you feel about Load? Speaking of, like, were you a... Because I honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I don't dislike Load like other people. That's why I put that question on the group. It's like, they're polarizing in general, even from the Black Album on.
Yeah.
Black Album itself is polarizing, which we talked about in '91. Not polarizing for me. I think it's a great rock record. But I think Load is still kind of the last one I really
love
like.
the Black Album. Again, I'm going to bust out the Portland story because I remember going to San Francisco with my pops. He was on a business trip, and I bought Load. Now, we heard the song however long before, a couple weeks before, whatever.
Until It Sleeps.
Yeah. And I remember we were driving somewhere, as my dad and I.
Pretty soft song.
And it was like, okay, here's the new Metallica. Right. And it started playing, and we're just like, my dad's sitting there driving, and we kind of went,
yeah.
Is this the new Metallica song?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's a soft single. Right?
It just wasn't.
Ronnie on there was kind of heavy, though. They had some heavier cuts on
it. It's one of those albums that if it wasn't a Metallica album, if they had a different name,
right,
it probably would have been accepted better. I don't know. There's songs on it that I dig, but the
Image was also drastically different.
Oh, dude, that cover, the fucking blood and semen cover, and then Kirk and Lars on the inside touching tongues or whatever the fuck they're doing, or dude, it's just. I didn't get it, and I remember reading an interview where I think James said that was like all them, and that and this is kind of after Saint Anger, and he got out of like rehab again, and he was kind of like, yeah, I could regret doing that. It's like, well, I can kind of see why. I think Reload's one of the worst albums I've ever heard. I think Reload and Saint Anger are garbage.
I think anything after Load, I really don't care about. I just don't really even care that much. I'm not saying I just don't dislike Load. If it's on, I'm not mad. I don't go and throw it on all the time.
There's songs that I don't want to hear. Ain't My Bitch. I don't like that. But there's tunes on it that.
It's been such a part of my life. You hear the songs in Target. I mean, it's not like it's like they're a big band. It's just
that, and that probably arguably it never as big as the Black Album, but I think it kept that momentum going.
I guess I never really held them to the same. I've never really, maybe because of how I grew up, I refuse to, criticize Metallica or hold them to the same standard I hold, a Sacramentum record. They're just different. You know what I'm saying? It's like they're like fucking Aerosmith, like a major rock band. I don't remember. Because of my age, I don't remember them being some underground threat. They've never been that band to me. They've always been some major band.
That's why That's why I love the Black Album, because that's where I came in. So by the time I came in, a lot of those older fans were, fuck this shit, it's a sellout album. But for me, it was like, this is still a metal album, and I love it, and that's what I remember. But
let's be honest, they had probably all moved on anyway from them by that point.
Yeah, but you can go back and understand why they lost a lot of fans, and that was the one album that they did kind of fall into that trap of, oh, well, they changed the logo here, and they cut their hair. Here we go. And I know bands like that will always say that didn't mean anything. It's like maybe it was inadvertent, but it kind of did.
It does.
Because when you change the logo and you cut your hair, it was kind of like, what is that fucking biblical story of like Samson when he cut his hair and he turned into a fucking weakling. that's kind of the same thing. It was like those.
Now,
bands.
what about instead of cutting your hair, you dye your dreads pink and put on an Umbro jersey and start playing a little bow, and you put out Roots is good, man. I'm sorry. Roots is good. Roots is fine with me.
I appreciate everybody listening.
I don't even care, man. I'm gonna be 12 years old again. Roots is fine, dude. It's heavy. It's not beneath the remains, but you know what? I was 12 years old, 13 years old, and I like Attitude. Leave me alone.
Okay. Attitude, Cutthroat.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. Like that's another band that now they did keep the logo.
That's about all
everything else changed. And that was kind of Max's descent into like heavy metal's Bob Marley. That I'm pretty sure that dude hasn't taken a bath since 1996. And he just looks like a grimy motherfucker.
He does look like he does.
And I'm just not. I'm not into it. And I tried to go back to it for this episode, and I don't know, man. It's too much. I love Chaos AD. Love that album. I thought I had just enough of a little bit of that influence. But then when Roots went off the fucking charts with the Brazilian kind of folk, whatever.
The tuning is really low too.
And it's cool that they do that. I get it. I have no problem with that. Like I respect it. But that was it went from like thrashy headbanging to me to like Janko jeans and ball bearing necklaces and just
it was a bit of a departure. And I will say, it's not an album I listen to all the time, but it's again because of like my age or whatever. I associate it. I didn't hate it as much when I was a kid. It was a bridge album for a lot of younger kids. For a lot of people my age, I'm 38. For a lot of us, that was one of the first heavy records we probably ever bought. And eventually it was our bridge record. It's a gateway record.
Yeah.
I look at it like, for a lot of people, like, I feel like Slipknot is a band like that. For a lot of people, like, some of those bands are bridge bands. But it's like, speaking of the Manson thing, it's a good segue into, like, we'll get into, like, black metal and melodic death, which was really big at this time. Cradle of Filth, Dusk in Her Embrace, and Stormblast by Dimmu, those are kind of more mainstreamy bands that I think embraced that little, they a little bridge between the extreme underground and the mainstream of those Manson kind of fans too. Cradle was huge in the mid to late 90s, and people kind of forget.
No, it's a good point.
And Dimmu too. They were bridge bands.
Yeah, those bands, especially Dummy Burger.
Yeah.
I knew people like going back to shows or going to shows back in the day. There were people that I would see at shows that would, like, one show they were wearing a Dummy Burger shirt, and then the next show they're wearing a fucking Marilyn Manson shirt.
Yeah.
And so I could see that, and it was probably because Dimmu and Cradle were very heavy on, like, the mesh fucking shirts and the makeup.
Yeah,
and
Image was
like
they were a bit more bombastic with the appearance.
Exactly. So maybe that, I don't know.
Synths too. I think the synths and Cradle did a lot of that female.
Don't get me wrong. I love Dimmu way more than I love Cradle of Filth until they became like that.
See, I like Cradle more. Dusk in Her Embrace I like that record. This is a great fucking album. I love Dusk in Her Embrace. I think it's doomy. I think it's dark. It's not corny.
Yeah.
He doesn't do as much of this bullshit.
To me, Dimmu really starts not with Stormblast, but with Enthroned. Darkness Triumphant. Like that to me is better than anything that Cradle has put out, in my opinion. But I do like, it's just his vocal. It's Danny's vocal.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it's not like the mid-range shit. It's the fucking like
super high
chirping black metal weasel shit that I can't.
It's
I have a lot of respect for him too, dude. That dude
definitely
is still doing it. And I was over at Arnie's a few weeks ago, and he played one of the newer albums. Dude, it fucking ripped. It was still good, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is really good."
But some of the stuff from '96, when you get Philosophum by Burzum, which I know is kind of more of a comp of a lot of their older stuff. Nemesis Divina, which we played here before we set up. Triarchy of the Lost Lovers by Rotting Christ.
That dude,
Antichrist by Gorgoroth. I'm just
King
gonna
of
go
the Stellar
through these,
War on Triarchy of the Lost Lovers. Like, first of all,
Oh
Rotting
my
Christ
God.
is one of the most underrated. Greek black metal is at the top for me. It's always been at the top because of Rotting Christ. They're just like, it has that certain feel, that cadence to, you know, the songs, the melodies. Like, I don't know, but
Or Celtic Frost kind of deal.
exactly, it's not blazing speed like a lot of like
Yeah, it doesn't need to be.
No, and to me, Triarchy. I remember buying. It was a Century Media. It was called the Out of the Dark compilation. It had. Oh my God! It had Rotting Christ, Moonspell, Crematory, Sentenced. Somebody else was on there, but one of the Rotting Christ songs was King of the Stellar War.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. And I just remember being like, the name of the band, you think it's going to be one thing. It didn't really fit the music all that much. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is good, because when you listen to the music, I was instantly booked. So
I mean, dude, it's funny. Like while we were in the middle of the death metal thing, when I was in high school, I got really into a lot of black metal, and a lot of these records from '96, as I was going through them, Total Death by Darkthrone is one of my favorite black metal records of all time. It's like a half Celtic Frost, half Bathory. I implore a lot of young kids, when I talk to younger kids, getting into black metal, like, what's an album I should check out? I always tell them Total Death by Darkthrone is the first one you should check out. And people are always like, why? I'm like, because you're going to get side A is Celtic Frost, side B is Bathory, and that's the best way. Darkthrone was always a worship band of those two bands, so it's a great way to start. Gorgoroth Antichrist was a great record I loved. Great Norwegian black metal record. Gorgoroth, we haven't really talked a lot about Gorgoroth in the 90s. I mean, they're kind of like, I think what they became was something else, but these early Gorgoroth records I think hold up.
I mean, they're classic Norwegian black metal albums.
Secrets of the Black Arts and Heaven
Dude,
Shall
that was the
Burn
next one.
by Marduk. This hypocrisy that we'll get into when we talk about death metal. Peter Tigran moonlighted in Marduk live during this era in '96. Secrets of the Black Arts by Dark Funeral and this Marduk record, that sweet, that Peter Tigran production, is so, it's so distinct, and that evil Swedish guitar tone on those records is blistering, and the craziness with the blast beats. It's
the great thing,
step forward, it's a step forward.
And the great thing about that Dark Funeral album is the newer stuff
sounds kind of
goes
like
back
I know.
to that.
It does.
It's really good. It doesn't sound corny or forced. Those newer Dark Funeral albums are, like, the past couple have been excellent. I love Secrets of the Black Arts. I didn't get into the stuff after that as much. I always thought that album to me was an absolute classic black metal album.
Were you a Borknagar fan? The Borknagar self-titled record?
Yes.
I liked that a lot when I was younger. God Killer 2, Rebirth from the Middle Ages.
I have friends that worship that band. I mean, Arnie worships that band, Borknagar. And to me, I dig the early stuff. I love the self-titled.
Yeah, it's cool.
I love the Archaic Course.
A little folky.
I'm trying to think
for
of
me, but it's good.
The Olden Domain. I get into it. I even like some of the newer stuff. I have a lot of respect for them, but that early stuff to me was
a bit more straightforward. Judas Iscariot, great, U.S. band that we haven't talked about. They don't have a '90s record. My favorite record by them is not a '90s record. It's To Embrace the Corpse is Bleeding, which is my favorite U.S. black metal album of all time. Judas Iscariot, Dying Light, '96. Vlad Tepes, the Black Legions in France, Black Legions metal. I Shall Become, Wanderings, which is a great depressive black metal album, kind of a staple in that subgenre of music too. And Bethlehem, a band we haven't talked about a lot. Dicticus de Near is. Bethlehem's awesome.
How was that again?
No, I probably butchered that. Something else. But it's great.
That's one band I've always heard the name, but I never listened to the actual
so unique,
band.
Man. Such a unique band. Nothing sounds like them. Crazy vocals.
To me, it was listening to Arcturus, that Aspera, Heims Symphonia. That album, I don't like what the band became, but that album to me, I heard it on a comp, one of the songs on a comp, and it was just killer.
Yeah.
And hearing a black metal song that had like this fucking amazing guitar solo in it, was just so different, and it hooked me instantly. That is a classic album. I mean, I would recommend that in terms of like top 10 90s black metal
I know you're a
albums.
Melflush fan too, and as Jerusalem Burns, that's 96. Mysticum has In the Streams of Inferno, great industrial kind of black metal, but my favorite black metal record of 96, The Abyss, Summon the Beast.
You like The Abyss?
Biello and I heard when they were on Nuclear Blast Comp. I think the Death is Just the Beginning or something like that. It was like a hidden track or a secret track. And Peter's black metal band from 96. This is so awesome. Again, has that Hardy kind of sound, that Sound Lab studio kind of vibe, where it's just such a big, at that time, really unique, bombastic sound for black metal.
It's like
Hyper Blast. It was
like
crazy.
a wall of noise.
It was.
It's just like, yeah. And it was going back to like the identity comps. That's what really kind of opened my eyes to a lot of these bands and to a lot of different types of music. And so some of the biggest albums for me, let me get to before the comp. I remember I had a Rip magazine, and I was looking at one of the ads in it, and it was Moonspell Irreligious. And I think that around that time they were, maybe in Europe, they went on tour with Typo Negative.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And so I was kind of like, all right, I already love Typo Negative, so I wonder what Moonspell sounds like. And so I remember I just bought the album, and it's absolutely fucking, it is a classic gothic heavy metal album. And I think every song on it rules. Full Moon Madness is just Herr Spiegelman. Opium is like the one kind of lead off track. When Full Moon Madness, when he says Full Moon Madness, and it literally sounds like they needed a fucking spit guard when he was recording the vocals. Like, Fernando's vocals are just unbelievable. That album to me is what that's one of those pivotal albums that when you heard it, it's like it, you know, you buy an album and it's like, oh, you start listening to all this other shit that's kind of like it. With Moonspell, it was like that's what kind of set me on that path of like, one of the albums that set me on that path of listening to heavier stuff, like, you know, Opeth and things like that.
A lot of good melodic death metal from this era too, which I'm sure that helped you get into. I mean, a lot of classics in this year too. Ventureland, Welcome to My Last Chapter.
Dude, don't get me started on that.
Jester Race, Crimson, Edge of Sanity. So come on, man. Gates of Ishtar, Blood Red Path.
What's your favorite song on that Edge of Sanity?
But that's no. Favorite song on Jester Race, definitely Moonshield. Great opener. Just an awesome, there's so many good albums in this genre. Acornis Quintet, Silence of the World Beyond.
Okay, here's the thing. Acornis Quintet, I bought probably not several years ago, but they came out with every album in like a Digipack collection.
Really?
So Silence of the World Beyond is one of the greatest albums I've ever heard, okay? For that, especially for that era.
No fashion.
The Only Pure Hate, if you like Slaughter of the Soul, I would urge everybody to listen to The Only Pure Hate, because I think it's just as fucking good. It's
that's a bold statement.
Acornis Quintet, I love Ablaze My Sorrow.
Blaze My Sorrow.
No, there's
Emotions
96. There's a lot of
Allegiance, Hymn Till Heimgard. That's a No Fashion release too. No Fashion, big for 96, man.
Yeah.
But Welcome to My Last Chapter, I feel like, and Jester Race are at the top. Gates of Ishtar too. Those are probably the top 3 melodic death metal albums of 96. I've been getting way more into this stuff in the last few years.
Because I remember when we did the melodic death metal episode with Anthony, there was a lot of stuff that you were like, yeah, I don't listen to this.
Yeah, I give it more of a chance, and it's like, you know what? This stuff's actually pretty solid.
If you like Slaughter of the Soul and you like At the Gates, there's no reason why you shouldn't like Winterland. And you like black metal. Swedish black metal to me was always killer. I loved it. It's probably like
has a bit more of this influence.
It's for me it's like number 2, so you got like Greek. Swedish is number 2 because there was a lot of that melodic influence to it. And that's what I love. Winterland is just a classic.
I always went Norway and Sweden.
Okay.
But it's like but I feel like, you know, the Greek stuff's really cool, but I feel like this melodic death metal in Sweden is, you know, it's crazy too, because I mean Catatonia puts out Brave Murder Day and Anathema puts out Eternity, and even those albums, you know, Anathema being from England and Catatonia still being a Swedish band, they have that depressive melody element that's still kind of part of. I always lump them into this kind of world too, where it has like, because even like In Flames kind of still was doing that moody kind of riffing with the death metal. You know what I'm saying?
Even a lot of this stuff had like different styles, but I always listened to it together. To me, it all fit.
Yeah, didn't always have to be vicious all the time.
Yeah.
Those kind of bands could do slower cuts and do
I mean, another one back from that time that really got me into a lot of was more American power metal. If that's what you want to call it, and that was you had Iced Earth with the Dark Saga. This is long before his, he was on the run from the feds.
Right.
But you also had Nevermore, Politics of Ecstasy, them being dudes from Sanctuary.
Right.
I didn't really get into the earlier Nevermore stuff. To me, Politics was like really when it hit, and that's what like This Sacrament and Seven Tongues of God. Seven Tongues of God is what I heard on one of the comps, and it's so fucking heavy.
Right.
And I remember seeing them open for, or co-headlined with Merciful Fate in '99. And it was so loud and so heavy that I remember the stacks started to like fall over.
Oh, wow.
And they were like holding them up, and absolutely phenomenal band. Sucks that they're not around anymore. World Dane died, several years ago.
Sacramentum, Far Away from the Sun, too, was '96. So.
If I hear anybody look, I love Far Away from the Sun. If I hear anybody tell me that that's better than Dissection,
no, I'm not going to say that.
That's a bunch of fucking try-hard bullshit.
No, that's just you trying to name a band that's not Dissection.
I love I love that album.
It's great. It's not Storm of the Light's Bane, and it's not. That you can't do that.
So I'm going to talk about one album that was really kind of. I couldn't believe I bought it, and it was like embarrassing to me when I did buy it and I played it out, and that's Therion, Theli.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So early Therion stuff I think is fucking incredible.
Awesome.
I love Beyond Sanctorum, of Darkness is
great.
Dude, come
essential.
On. This shit is awesome. Lapaka Cliffoth, I love that. Theli, I heard a lot about. First of all, I had like one of the worst album covers, like Hypocrisy.
Yeah, this is up there. I mean, that's a really stupid. He looks like my ex-girlfriend.
It's like a fucking man dog thing, whatever.
That's accurate.
I remember putting it in. I was with a buddy that he may have bought it before me, but we're driving around.
I would never buy that record just based on that.
Dude, it was. The operatic bullshit with the music was fine, but
should call the album Man Bear Pig.
Man,
it's fucking thing.
Just not. And I know that I would say this arguably that's the album that kind of made them, because it seemed like they took off after that. But I'm not trying to be that guy. The shit before is way better.
Yeah,
I just can't. And I know people
based on looking at it, I know that's true.
Like Nick, who I do, a podcast with, Nick would disagree with me. He would say that Theli is amazing. That on is the stuff that
it's all. Hey, that's fine. That's how I am with Catatonia. I prefer the stuff when they. A lot of people love the doom death stuff. I appreciate it. I listen to it now more than I did, but I like their mid to later period more. I think it's death metal was in a weird place this time anyway. When we were going through a lot of the albums there's a lot of great records for '96 for death metal. But my favorite of '96 death metal record is Abducted by Hypocrisy. Stupid cover, be damned. I love the album. I think it's fucking awesome. I know it maybe starts their really the Fourth Dimension kind of started their departure maybe, but Abducted really I think is a fucking classic record. So many great songs on it. My favorite Hypocrisy track of all time, Killing Art, that Severed Remains used to cover when we were younger.
Oh, really?
Yeah, live used to do it all the time. And also, When the Candle Fades, awesome. Paradox, great song. Such an amazing album. Brought in the melody, different atmosphere with like the alien stuff and everything else like that. But it was so cool. Big Peter was dialed in with that production during this time. But also '96, None So Vile, Cryptopsy, classic. For technical death metal, a god tier record. It's the Rain and Blood for technical death metal.
So I'm probably gonna lose some fucking street cred on a couple things. I've never been a fan of Cryptopsy. I respect them. I know they have a new album coming out. So I kind of wonder.
Never really None So Vile.
I'm just not
really
into it. And another one that I know people are just probably gonna Immolation.
Here and After '90s, great album.
I love Dawn of Possession.
It's different. It is different.
To me, is my favorite album by them. I can't really say a favorite. It's the one that I really dig because when you say favorite to me, it's like you're like a fan of the band and you know what the other albums sound like. That's the one I like. Everything else, first of all, Here and After has got one of the greatest album covers. I think it's Andreas Marshall.
And a great album opener too with Nailed to Gold.
Yeah, and again, a lot of respect for that band. A ton of fucking respect.
Couldn't get into it. Yellow didn't get into it when we were younger either. A lot of my friends didn't really get into it. Or Incan when we were younger too.
So it's like, Immolation and Incan are the two bands that I know I totally respect their longevity. They're still plugging away, still putting out stuff that people love. What's that?
Just couldn't get into it.
It's just not my style of death. This is wasn't Monstrosity Millennium?
I was about to say, because I know you're a big Monstrosity guy. Millennium was, and Vile, which used to have George. How did you feel about Vile? I like Vile. Were you a fan of Vile? Were you not? Do you like the Barnes stuff? Do you not care about do you kind of end with them when Barnes leaves, or what camp are you in?
I'm a Barnes guy. Okay, so, but I'm really like, I don't know, like the Bleeding for me was like it.
But
I don't mind the other stuff. I like Vile.
If Vile's on, I find myself putting on, and you know what? I'll jam it, Kip, and I'll jam it through, and I'll be like, you know what? This is cool. But then I won't put it on again. If I want to listen to Cannibal Corpse, I'll put on the other stuff. When Vile's on, I'm like, this is pretty good. Yeah. But if I want George, I'll listen to Monstrosity. That's kind of how
the thing. To me, it's like George is Monstrosity. I absolutely love that band. I think they're still putting out quality shit.
Right.
So Millennium is a killer album.
And again, for '96, aside from Abducted and None So Vile, God Cries by Hypocrisy. By Asphyx. Wow. A God Cries by Asphyx is so. I love Martin. He's one of my favorite vocalists, my favorite vocal influences. But dude, God Cries is my favorite album without him. It's so good.
My favorite Asphyx album is the self-titled.
It's a great album too.
I don't think they ever put out a bad album in my.
They don't. For me, a Frozen Soul on God Cries. Come on,
dude. God Cries is fucking sweet.
It's fucking amazing.
It's a great album.
So vicious.
Now I can't say the same about Grave, Hating Life.
Hating Life. What's really funny is, I will say, like for Grave Plague, Asphyx, God Cries was probably one of the biggest vocal influences for me. You think people have high compliment. They were always, man, you sound a lot like you're into Martin, and I'm a big Martin fan. He was a big influence. But to be honest with you, I'm like, yeah, it's funny. Asphyx was a big vocal influence for me for that record, but not the singer you're thinking.
Yeah,
it's actually like God Cries was more aggressive, but it made a different aggressive vocal approach, a little more low end. But Hating Life, I don't mind. Again, it's groovy. It's a departure, but if it's on, I'm not mad. I think for Swedish death metal, I think Vomitory Raked in Their Own Blood, that's for me the top, and Deranged Sculpture of the Dead are both two Swedish bands from '96 that put out releases that I think are better, and they're more in the American vein.
Yeah.
And I think that Vomitory and Deranged had more of that American sound that bands in Sweden started to do, which later on when you get into the 2000s, you get like Incision and other bands like that doing it. I think Grave was kind of trying to do more of a heavy groove thing, and I dig it. Am I going to put it on before I put it into the grave? I'm not brain dead. But I mean, it's not super bad. I think Pandemonium too had a great record in '96.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
Sweden was in a weird place where like there's more of the American style Swedish stuff is getting more even Abducted's more American sounding.
You hacked up for barbecue guy?
Fuck yeah, dude.
You like?
I like horror movies, and I smoked weed in the bathroom in high school. Yes, I've listened to Hacked Up for Barbecue
Mortician.
once or twice in my day, dude.
Mortician was always great for, a couple of my buddies and I back then. We would always, no disrespect, but we'd always just crack up because it would be like a 7-minute fucking movie intro and then like a 30-second song. And again, another band, they've been around for years. I respect them. I don't know if they're still doing stuff. If Will Romer's still, is he?
They still do gigs here and there with Mortician. It's kind of more of a one-off thing every once in a while. Another band from '96 you were in, Dying Fetus. Mm-hmm. And you're not a big fan of Purification Through Violence.
No, here's the thing. So I started getting into it, especially with the new album coming out, which I think is a fucking amazing album cover, by the way. Cool. But yeah, no, I mean they're one of those bands that I was kind of like, I'm going back to it now, and it's like, yeah, this is pretty cool.
It's kind of how I am with the melodic death metal. It's like I'm going back to it, and I'm like, this is actually a lot. I messaged Tommy Haywood from Redefining Darkness. I was like, this melodic stuff is actually, and he even said, he's like, you've always been like me, when things aren't in vogue, you pay attention to it because you want to know what, mm-hmm. I've always had that kind of mentality. And the melodic stuff is so dead now. There's no band doing it. It's not trendy. There's no, you know what I'm saying? I'm going back to it like, you know what? This stuff really wasn't as bad as I thought it was when I was younger. Mm-hmm. It's actually really cool. And this, the brutal stuff in '96 really starts to take shape too. Adrenaline has Psychostasia, and then Deeds of Flesh has Trading Pieces. Big records.
I like Deeds of Flesh.
Good shit.
That I could be talking out of my ass.
Rest in peace, Eric.
That's the dude that owned
Unique
Leader. Okay.
Yeah, great. And I mean, again, like to just round it off, which there are a lot of like being obsessed with grind when I was younger too. '96 was big for power violence and grind. I'll just blast through this because I know nobody wants to hear too much about it. But Despise You, one of my favorite bands when I was younger. The West Coast power violence scene was crazy. There's a band tonight playing Drug Abuse in Apartment 213. Big bands in that scene. But Despise You was the West Coast scene with Stapled Shut, who also did a split with Despise You at this time. And Stapled Shut had a record called LA Times in '96. That scene was blowing up in the late '90s, '96 specifically. Gasp, Sore for Days. That scene was so harsh and crazy, so influential for me. The whole gang culture kind of element with that scene was cool. And so many great splits from bands. I just want to go through them quickly. Danak, Excreted Alive, had a great split. Ego Fix had an EP. Egrocid had a split with Gorby on Necropsy. So many good, awesome records. But as far as grind goes, Excruciating Terror, Expression of Pain, amazing record for '96, influential to this day. It's disgusting, it's hateful. Cruel Bastards, Your Lies in Check, Malicious Hate, In the Name of Hate, awesome band. Nuclear Death had a really experimental record with the Planet Sexual, was awesome. Catasexual Urge Motivation, Encyclopedia of Serial Murders. This is shit I was like into, especially when I was younger, you know what I'm saying? Exit 13, Gout to Belgium, amazing. Shout out to Bill Yerkowitz, good friend, awesome dude. But Harsh, self-titled EP, also too. Straight to Hell, split with Ungrateful, amazing. But the two tops for '96, I'm going really fast because with grind you got to go super fast. So I breezed through it because I know nobody gives a shit. But I got to go Anal Cunt, 40 More Reasons to Hate Us. It's fucking incredible. Featuring Phil. It's one of Anal Cunt's best fucking releases. It's so fucking good. It's good. And I gotta say, for the top one, Brutal Truth, Kill Trend Suicide, '96. Big Brutal Truth fan. So, those records still listen to this day. Brutal Truth. That record's their first Relapse release. Still to this day holds up as one of the best American grindcore releases of all time.
Grind is your thing.
Love it, man. I mean, you guys go through it fast, but it's like that's the for '96 a lot of great stuff. But that scene was really kicking, at this time. I think because death metal was so not in vogue. I mean, going through it, we talked about black metal a little bit and melodic stuff, and the more gothic stuff.
And I think
death metal's kind of dying at this point.
You say Morgoth?
No, I said death metal's more
Morgoth.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I was saying Morgoth had an album that year, Feel Sorry for the Fanatic,
right?
Which is
feel sorry for the people who listen to it.
Yeah, it was like I don't understand. It's like their Killing Joke album, and I love Killing Joke, but not when Morgoth does Killing Joke.
Right.
But have you heard that new Marcus from Morgoth?
Yeah, it's actually not.
He's with the dude from Volbeat, which
it was fine.
Fucking hate Volbeat.
It doesn't really sound like old. It doesn't really sound like Morgoth though.
No, I didn't expect it to. I think they were just trying to do something. It was called As in Hell.
Yeah.
So they're just trying to do kind of like a fun death metal, old school death metal, like Swedish.
I feel like Asphyx is one of the few bands that still kind of retains their classic sound when they put out a record. They just seem to always nail it.
Yeah, pretty much everything that like Asphyx. Anything Martin does these days, it just seems like when he was in Grand Supreme Blood Court, kind of the same thing.
I like Hail of Bullets too. I love
Hail of
Bullets was awesome with me. I thought it was cool.
On Divine Winds is my favorite album. That's the second one. But back in '96, there were so many good stoner albums that came out.
Again, we got through the grind stuff really quickly, so you could get to the
now
stuff.
We got to do Doom, so it'll take me 2 hours.
Exactly. It's like
no, but a lot of the stoner stuff back then. COC, the first COC album I bought was Blind, and then Deliverance came out, and then Wise Blood came out, which I think arguably had one of their biggest hits on it. I think they toured with Metallica around this time after this album came out. And I like Wise Blood. I think it's incredible. That was really influential for me. I think King of the Rotten is on there.
I kind of skipped Wise Blood going over. Like I like Deliverance a lot because I was always a big fan of the early stuff. I kind of skipped Wise Blood, but I went back to it. I liked it a lot more than I remember.
To me, it's the last. In the Arms of God's really good. Wise Blood to me is kind of like the last truly great COC, even though I like all of them to varying degrees. But Fu Manchu had In Search Of, which is absolutely fucking disgusting. It's a great album. Earth came out with Pentastar, which old school Earth I love because it's a lot heavier.
Yeah.
It's a lot more. It's more harsh, and some of the later stuff kind of got more into like almost like soundtrack music, especially some of their like Western influence stuff. It was like watching a spaghetti Western or something like that. It's just the way the music sounded to me. And I mean, Dylan Carlson is a fucking legend.
Yeah,
he's the one that if I recall correctly, reading that book I have, The Oral History of Grunge, the Seattle Scene, I'm pretty sure in that book it says that he's the one that bought Kurt Cobain
the gun. Right.
So, but yeah, man, Earth obviously taking their name from who Sabbath used to be.
Yeah.
One of the names, it was like Earth, and then the Polka Talk Blues Band, whatever. Cathedral, Supernatural Birth Machine.
For it, yep. I didn't mention it during the sludge stuff because I was waiting for you to mention it. For the
I don't understand why we got like the cheesy fucking cover with their faces.
I know.
The European version had like the better cover.
Right.
But
ours looks more like a Fu Manchu record than it does.
Yeah,
it's a good record though. You know, it's funny because like it's a record that's kind of lost on a lot of Doom fans.
Mm-hmm.
This is really a time when I think Cathedral was kind of moving away from that classic Doom sound anyway. Definitely getting more experimental with the psychedelic stoner sound.
Yeah, it was getting more like straightforward stuff. I still like it. I like every Cathedral album. My favorite one's End Time. I just think that everything about it, even his vocals, fit on that. The Heads, which is another great British band, relaxing with that album. The Want, Greatest Hits Volume 5. Now, Southern Lord released that album, I think, around 2000, 2001. But the Want did have an album in 96, and the Want is like this great kind of old school, if you like Zeppelin, Deep Purple, things like that. If you can find that album, it's phenomenal. One of the albums that I bought when I lived in Portland, I could sing every lyric to it. I think it's one of the greatest things I've ever heard. Kind of goes along with Alice in Chains Unplugged, and that's Zakk Wylde's Book of Shadows albums.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Okay, so Book of Shadows, this is like pre-Sons of Anarchy, douchebag Zakk Wylde.
Was in pinch harmonics on every single
Yeah, no, this is like an all pretty much acoustic album for the most part. But it just worked, and
Early Black Label Society, I didn't have a problem with, so.
To me, it was like, you know, he was with Ozzy, and then he did Pride and Glory, which is kind of like heavy metal, Allman Brothers and Skinner, mixed with Sabbath. Absolutely killer album. Book of Shadows is one of the greatest. I mean, the songwriting on it is just absolutely incredible. I'm sitting here talking about it, and I got it running through my head. I wore that damn album out. And going back and kind of revisiting it, doing this episode, I was like, man, this is such a good record. But there were some massive disappointments for me too, not just the Danzig album that we spoke about. Ministry Filth Pig.
Forgot about, yeah, God.
Not a fan.
Yeah,
after Psalm 69.
After Psalm, I don't care. I couldn't care less.
There's some good stuff that came out here and there.
I'll jam with Sympathy before I ever put Psalm 6, before I ever put this on. So.
Yeah, no, I mean,
before I ever put Filth Pig on, before I even put Psalm 69 on, I'll put With Sympathy on, but that's my only me. But
Psalm 69, I think, to me, it's just up there with The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste, and Twitch, and
Land of Rape and Honey.
Yes, Land of, which he got that album title. I think they were in like Minnesota or Wisconsin or something, and maybe he took a piss in the bathroom and somebody wrote The Land of Rape and Honey, and so that's where they got that. But yeah, Filth Pig, and then like Dark Side of the Spoon and Animosity. That's what really kind of set them down that path of like putting out some shitty albums, and it really took George W. Bush and like the war in Iraq to kind of piss him off again.
Yeah.
And I think he got back into being political and kind of like that dark industrial.
Right.
But then it became like annoyingly political.
Yeah.
It's like, we get it, dude. Like, you fucking hate him, all right?
Yeah, it's kind of corny.
But
it's a weird way to get inspired. I feel like in the early days they didn't need inspiration. They certainly didn't need cheap politics.
Yeah, and it became that, and it's pretty much it's the Al Jorgensen show.
Yeah,
you know, but Prong was another one that with Rude Awakening. To me, Cleansing and everything before was incredible. Rude Awakening was like maybe their more Killing Joke. Industrial.
I feel like Pitch Shifter is another band in '96 that really kicked the bucket.
There's another one. Pitch Shifter was like.
We'll get to them in '92, which we're going to do next, because Submit is one of my favorite releases of all time in the 90s,
Yeah.
but they fucking really lost the plot.
I completely agree with you. And
we
there's
totally,
a lot
we totally
of
skipped
stuff
over
that,
it too, and I forgot too. Godflesh in '96 this year as one of my favorite albums of
is it Songs of Love and Hate?
Songs of Love and Hate, which is one of my favorite records of all time, which is crazy because we've talked a couple times in the '90s about nu metal and its goofy incorporation of hip hop music, but to me, Godflesh was always unique because Justin always sampled Eric B. and Rakim. He would do a lot of loops of trip hop stuff. It's like there's a way to incorporate hip hop music
Isn't that
in metal.
their trip hop kind of their?
They have songs of love and hate in dub, which has a lot of their stuff that's really like more trip hop influenced. But it's like he sampled a lot of hip hop on that record, and there's a way to incorporate it in a way that doesn't suck and make you look like an asshole. And I think Songs of Love and Hate by Godflesh is such an awesome record, but weird because when people think of industrial in '96, they think of like these bands kind of deviating towards something. I think maybe trying to be more commercial. I don't really know what they were trying.
I think it was kind of the oh my god, Prodigy effect, where Prodigy got so big with the Fat of the Land, that album. Which, if you like that kind of electronic music,
which I do like Prodigy.
I don't mind that album, okay? But I think that is what like Pitch Shifter and other bands tried to do, because they could see that, oh my god, this shit is... The difference is that the Fat of the Land was like actually good, where a lot of these other groups, and when you think about industrial, to me it was like 80s and then like the very early 90s was like the heyday for industrial for me. And
late
at this point, getting into, there was a lot of bands that were putting albums out that just kind of I didn't give a shit about. Another disappointment was Biohazard's Model Layout. I'm not
a fan of it either.
After State of the World Address,
I'm done.
Mata was just kind of the one song, Monday morning, feel so bored, fuck the rules, fuck. Not into it. It didn't have that like.
It's a little too corny. It's a little too Evan Seinfeld and Jinkos for me.
Yeah, like, so I really wasn't into it that much. Overkill with the Killing Kind, that was their era, like after Horoscope, and you had I Hear Black and WFO and the Killing Kind and stuff. It was like, I didn't mind those albums, but it was like a very dark time for Overkill fans, as far as for me, because they don't really. I never go back to those records.
I enjoy Necroshine kind of quite a bit, actually. I remember putting that on a while ago and kind of enjoying it. But there's some of their late '90s stuff I don't really mind so much.
I don't think they ever put a bad album out, but there's a definite.
Again, am I gonna put it on before I put on like Under the Influence? I mean, I'm not fucking brain dead. Okay? I'm not gonna I'm not gonna be like, no, dude, I'm fine with Necroshine. No taking over for me. I'm good. I'm not like that.
Yeah.
So.
And there was a lot of really bad shit coming out in terms of a lot of around this era, a lot of the Sunset Strip bands or a lot of the hard rock bands from LA that were trying to like fit in LA Guns with American hardcore. I think it was Chris Van Dahl was the vocalist, and it was really kind of Tracy Guns just trying to do... A lot
of fitting in with a lot of genres here, which is why I feel like...
It was just bad.
A record I think we forgot to mention when we were talking about death metal, which is a band that's never tried to fit in with anything, was Brutality, had In Warning.
Yeah. Which
I think is a classic fucking death metal record that I'm not going to fuck up and not mention in '96, because that's a fucking amazing. They don't have a bad record.
In terms of like the first three out, though, that's like one of the best, like a trifecta of
records,
perfect death metal records.
They're fucking amazing.
It's
Scott is
like,
one of the best vocalists.
I mean, we kind of
death metal
jumped from LA Guns to Brutality, which is fine because that LA Guns album sucks, but it's. With Brutality, if you want to talk about like the death metal stuff, probably one of the most underrated bands.
Sure. The point is like LA Guns and a lot of these bands trying. bands trying to fit in a lot of trends and genres. There are bands that aren't. And I think like bands like LA Guns and Ministry, if they would have just stuck to their guns, no pun intended, and done what they were, I feel like it's cool. Like LA Guns could have put out a great hard rock record in '96. There's still an audience for it.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a rock audience for it that would have probably. The problem is, I think maybe labels weren't pushing it.
No, they weren't, and it was a weird time with a lot of those bands. There was like CMC International was like one of the big labels at that time. I think American Hardcore came out on CMC International, and you know Dokken was on it, and Slaughter, and all these bands were just coming out and.
Factory of records nobody cares about. Yeah.
No, like Dokken came out with Shadow Life is one of the worst fucking albums I've ever heard. You had it was just weird. Like I never thought if there's when Sepultura does Roots, it translates better.
Yeah, it seems like a natural.
If people don't like it, like again, I'm not a big fan of it at all.
But it definitely wasn't Roadrunner being like, hey, you got to dye your dreads pink. And
and it's like, but it made more sense.
That's what I think underground music fans, not to cut. That's what I think underground extreme metal fans get wrong about stuff like Roots. In their mind, they think it's the same thing as an LA Guns record, and it's not. Roadrunner Records was not telling Max, they weren't calling Max like, hey, you got to dye your dreads pink and be a... They're in their mind. That's not how it works.
Mm.
LA Guns and these kind of bands. There's more of a music industry push. Like, listen, you need to stay relevant or you're dropped. Roadrunner wasn't going to drop Sepultura if they didn't make Root.
Well,
it's not the same thing.
Yeah, and with a lot of those Sunset Strip bands, they literally were fucking just like the next day dropped.
Yeah,
and it's because of Nirvana and stuff like that. Now, obviously, Nirvana didn't like. Purposely fucking get them kicked off the label.
The CIA didn't put Kirk. Maybe he did. Who knows?
You know, it's like there was a fucking conspiracy to get Bret Michaels kicked off a label and to make him bald. Right.
Alex Jones in a call screaming that's actually the truth, and that the CIA tried to put Kurt Cobain up to it.
Either that, or Jesse Ventura. I was there
in the Baja.
Yeah, there in the Baja. But. Yeah, that was like a dark time for a lot of that music because I still love it today. I still love all those bands. We did a Sunset Strip episode and I have no problem. I love that shit. I still dig it. I listen to it all the time. A lot. I think the bands that survived the best were the bands that just fucking went away, and that was like Rat.
Yeah, I think what you mean.
Certain groups like Winger, they just kind of went away. And it was like they did other things.
They kind of knew it was time to go away.
Mm-hmm. Wasp put out Kill Fuck Die.
Great album, though. Kill Fuck Die is great. Kill Fuck Die is great.
Which I love.
Of all the goofy, industrial, trendy records, like, hey, man, Black Acid Evil sucks, and Kill Fuck Die does not.
That is the perfect... I'd love to do a poll. Like, what album do you think is better? Black Acid Evil.
Got me into Kill Fuck Die? Razor Fist. Razor Fist on YouTube is he's a big defender of wearing sunglasses in his own house and Kill Fuck Die. But he's the one who made me to check that out. Now, weird transition here, but 96, before I miss out, we don't really talk about hardcore a whole lot on this, but 96, big year. Petitioning the Empty Sky, I know you had, you were talking about Dillinger before we got on.
Mm-hmm.
Petitioning the Empty Sky, that was a big record for me as a young kid too. Converge went on to kind of dominate the early 2000s, and this is one of their pivotal records. Saddest Day, such a great... Metalcore would become the thing, I think, of the early 2000s, and this... A lot of great albums. Gomorrah Seasons Ends by Earth Crisis, another band from that 96 Ozfest comp. Didn't really know what hardcore was, didn't know what that stuff was.
Vision of Disorder was on that.
Vision of Disorder, right? Self-titled Vision Disorder, also 96. So it's like, I can see why, Roots makes sense in the context of like, I think the kids that were buying Roots were kids buying, Bloodlet.
Mm-hmm.
Entheogen that comes out in 96. They were buying, One Life Crew from Cleveland, controversial record, Crime Ridden Society, that's all we'll say about that. Crown of Thorns, Mentally Vexed. They had a song called Pure Disgust, which was pretty much about like immigration and like a more right-wing thing. but Slapshot, Old Time Hardcore. But Earth Crisis and Integrity, Humanity is the Devil.
Is
Cleveland.
Which is the one that Doors?
Doors on Humanity is the Devil
Okay.
and Seasons and the Size of Days, which came out in '97. But for Cleveland, this is one of the greatest metallic hardcore records of all time. Integrity is hands down one of the most influential bands in hardcore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, when you put the kids buying Roots, I think were kids buying these records, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not so much death or thrash fans anymore. It's like a lot of my hardcore friends as I got older in my 20s, they liked World Demise. They liked Roots.
Mm-hmm.
They liked Chaos AD. They didn't really like
I think
Beneath
it's
the
just
Remains
a
all
lot
that
of the
much.
old
So,
school people, can I understand and sympathize 100% with a lot of people that listen to Morbid Visions, Bestial
Sure.
Devastation, why they don't like Roots? Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely.
But that Roots still found an audience.
Yeah.
Some of the shit that we were talking about, like the hard rock bands, they didn't find an audience.
Hey man, say what you want. I think again, death metal fans and thrash fans don't understand. It's like for a lot of, there's a subset of an audience that they like World Demise and Roots and Chaos AD, and they really don't like, Cause of Death that much.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a kid that grew up listening to Converge and Bloodlet and Earth Crisis and you're a hardcore dude, why would you like Beneath the Remains more than Roots? Like, why? You would like Chaos AD and Roots a hell of a lot more.
Chaos ID it's super political. I think there was a lot of like punk attitude with that album, and that's why I love the album. Roots just kind of went, it's weird when people are like, oh, that's new metal. They were doing a new album. That's not what they set out to do.
Right.
They just did that album. And so looking back, do I think it's like just new metal trash? No, I just think it's a Sepultura album I don't like. It just happens because I think what Life is Peachy is, Korn is 96, isn't it?
I thought it was 96, 97. I don't know. That to me is like going to get a root canal. I kind of
exactly. So that
to
me, that shit is new metal.
Right.
Not to me. That Sepultura album was just a weird. It's like if you took like Brazilian kind of rhythm folk type shit, and mixed it with Sepultura, that's what you got. So to me, it's like, I think that a fucking like native tribe with bones through their nose, that fucking eat people like they're whatever the fuck they do.
Right.
They've never been contacted,
right.
Except when fucking Igor and Max would like came walking through with like some fucking bongos and weed and fucking Umbro shirts, and they were like, "Hey, let's do this album."
Right.
There's nothing new metal to me about that, even though that I understand. It's kind of like when people say, oh, well, Machine Head, or Fear Factory, demanufactured. That really was like, help new metal. And I'm thinking,
no, I
that's not fucking new metal.
I always say this too. It's like new metal to me is not a sound. It's just a weird conglomerate of things that people throw together that they don't. It's almost like even like Acme had a great metalcore album this year called To Reduce the Choir to One Soloist. It's so heavy that I remember hearing about Acme, this band, this record, in punk scenes because punks loved it because the singer was in a German punk band for a long time. And it's like, why is that acceptable but other stuff like VOD isn't? And it's not so much the sound, it's more like the marketing and how it's shifted to people. It's like, I came to this Acme record from that punk scene. I came up listening. It's one of the greatest metalcore records of the 90s, 96.
Yeah.
And it's like, why is Roots a new metal record? Because his dreads are pink?
I think it's because
it doesn't sound like Korn.
The rhythms in it and shit like that. It's bouncy, but it's not bouncy because they're trying to like just ape.
Yeah.
Okay, so I love Anthrax and Public Enemy separately. I love when Anthrax did Bring the Noise with Public Enemy because it was like literally Anthrax, perfect amount with perfect amount of Public Enemy.
Yeah.
To me, new metal was like less metal and more just a bunch of white dudes thinking that they were rappers, and it just sucked.
Yeah.
And so I thought like all
and not
that
rapping
shit,
well, by the way.
But that's exactly. But that's not Roots.
Yeah.
I'll defend it. I don't think it's a new metal album. I think it's
I think it's a very much a departure.
100%.
And I think that's why, and I get again why it's hated. But I mean, I think it's funny because like there's a couple records I forgot to mention before we start to get into the wrap up session here. But it's like Abscess, Seminole Vampires. And we talked about Autopsy a lot in the '90s. Mm-hmm. A band that again was unsung.
Let me just say that Chris Reifert is. Everybody keeps talking about Chuck. Look, respect Chuck, respect Death. I love Death.
Holding it down throughout the whole '90s, man.
Chris Reifert, to me, is like John McEntee, where it's like one of the most underrated legends.
Everything he does is good. Every band he does.
Again, I'm not a big fan of Incan, but give me a fucking break. Like that. So you hear about Glenn Benton.
Right.
And I think it's more because of the goofy antics.
The persona is like a lot bigger.
Persona. Yeah. But come on, dude. Like,
a lot of people never even seen a Chris Reifert interview. Like, he's a pretty low-key dude. He's pretty chill. But his bands in the 90s, I mean, Abscess... here's a really hot take. I like Abscess, the band, as much as I like Autopsy. And we were obsessive Autopsy fans in the early 2000s when nobody gave a shit about them. Mm-hmm. And you could buy their albums and their shirts for $10 online. Because they, Abscess is such an awesome, punky death metal band. Mm-hmm. They carried on like what Autopsy was doing with Shit Fun. And Seminole Vampires is an awesome record. And Human Remains, Using Sickness as a Hero, another great Relapse release in '96. That cool too, technical, unique, have kind of a metalcore-y thing too. They were kind of doing like the grooves and that kind of stuff. Like Dave Whitty, one of the greatest drummers of all time, like extreme metal drummers, awesome. And those are two records I wanted to kind of mention. It's like again, people kind of still doing that.
He's a municipal now, isn't he?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you think about? You're talking about. Okay, so you're a Stuck Mojo guy.
You know what? It's funny. I used to watch WCW Nitro. Yeah, I had Stuck Mojo. I didn't hate as much as like a lot of the other stuff.
I like Pig Walk. Okay, I saw Stuck Mojo at Ron's Crossroads. Play to like 20 people.
Was that '96?
Pig Walk, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Pig Walk is. I think Pig Walk is fucking great. I don't have a problem with that band. I get why.
What was the WCW Championship belt album cover? That's the one I remember. Rising. That's right.
Rising, and then Snapping Necks, I think was the first one. Then Pig Walk, then maybe Rising. Oddly enough, that band ended up. I think the dudes in that band ended up becoming Fozzy.
Yeah, they did actually. That's true. Yeah.
Which I think is the shittiest fucking.
I've never listened to Fozzy.
You don't ever want to listen to Fozzy. If you want to know what Fozzy feels like, just try shoving your fist in your ass without lube, and that'll get you close to what it's like.
Well, speaking of which, I do have a nice young lady coming over here after we're done, so we can probably.
No, another. Just kind of go through one of the greatest, just kind of hard rock, straightforward albums. Helicopters, super shitty to the max.
Right.
Pretty sure it's '96.
I know you're a big Drain STH guy.
Jesus. Wasn't one of those chicks married to
Tony Iommi?
Tony Iommi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, suck your way to the top.
I'm gonna be completely honest with you. Remember the band? I remember it was like they're from Sweden or something, aren't they? Like all chicks. I've never heard one fucking second of any of their stuff, and I don't.
I totally forgot about this too. '96. Speaking of girls, or female front women, Crisis, Death Shed Extermination. They were a band I think was underrated too. Like this '96 record, they were cool. Mm-hmm. They kind of bridged that metalcore kind of metal, death metal thing.
Were you like better Crisis or Fear of God?
Okay, well not to be this guy, but there was only one Fear of God for me, and they're from Switzerland, and they're an Noise Core band. But the Fear of God with the chick from Detente, yeah, I get. It's a great album. It's a great release. They're cool. Like they're good. But I think they're neck and neck. I think Crisis was good too.
Is Karen Crisis dead?
I don't think so. Last I know, she lived in New York, and I think she does like a fashion line for.
Not to be disrespectful about that.
No, they haven't been a band in a long time. They were cool though. They were unique. Honestly, I would go with that Fear of God record from '91 is better than Crisis, but
Within the Veil.
Yeah, it is better. But that's also me. I think
I think a big album. One of the things I was really excited about '96 was the Van Halen Best Of, because they came out with a couple new David Lee Roth tracks. One of them was Meatwise Magic.
That's true.
That was on that album, and
we didn't talk about Enema by Tool.
You don't like Tool.
I know, but it's still a big album. I mean, that's
like, a massive album.
I talked about a fucking Danak split with fucking. I have to at least mention a Tool record. That's like.
Enema, that album to me is, dude, it's Undertow and Enema. If somebody were to ask me what Tool albums were, just get the first three. Just get Opiate, Undertow, and Enema.
Big record. I mean, it was,
I think it's incredible. I think that they're another band that the fans.
They were like that Manson crowd too. They kind of tapped into that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was like all of that stuff. I think 9 Inch Nails, Manson, Tool, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And which I didn't have
Skinny
a problem
Puppy,
with.
Kinda got
Skinny Puppy. But then that's when the new metal crowd, they started mixing, and I just kind of when it went south.
Soul Survivor by Gorefest. Good Lord, let's not end on that note. I mean, I like a Departure record, but that's just not good.
What do you think of Undisputed Attitude, Slayer?
One of my favorite cover albums of all time. I mean, also you gotta think, man, I grew up liking a lot of punk and hardcore. So I mean, I loved, the Verbal Abuse covers that they did were awesome.
Mm-hmm.
The DI covers were great. I think it's funny. A lot of my friend Noah, he was writing some stuff and played me some stuff that he had written, and I was like, that's it sounds like Undisputed Attitude by Slayer. And we were talking, he's like, I love that record. It was always, I listened to that record a lot when I was younger.
There's a couple of
one of my favorite cover
original cuts on it.
Yeah,
too,
there were a couple.
Was it Gemini, the one?
Gemini, yeah. Exploited had Beat the Bastards, 96 too, speaking of punk, which I think is a cool record, going back. It's not as good as classic 80s Exploited, but it's still a good album. And Os Rotten had The System Works for them, cool punk record too. Punk in a Weird Place in 96, so those are some cool. So I think Slayer doing that in 96 was really cool, at least going back and doing, again, they could have gone and jumped on the Korn trend.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even say they kind of maybe did
you're
with Diablos.
You're a big Sublime guy.
I would. Let me say something, dude. Heroin's a scourge of the world, but at least it did one thing right. That's all I can say. But I think that Slayer record's cool. But yeah.
I'd have to mention probably my favorite Social D album, '96, White Light, White Heat, White Trash.
That's good. It's a good record.
Chuck Biscuits from Danzig.
Did that have which album had When She Begins to Rock? Is that White Heat? It is. That's 96.
Is that?
I think that is on that. That's one of my favorite Social D songs.
Have to look that up. Don't Drag Me Down is on it, which is one of my favorite albums. I think it's just a phenomenal.
Actually, that's not on that record. I'm wrong. That's an earlier song.
I Was Wrong was the big hit.
I Was Wrong was the big hit. Yeah, I'm wrong. That is on the.
That's the first song I ever heard by Social D, and I just fucking loved it. But they still play Dear Lover, Don't Drag Me Down, Through These Eyes.
You like it more than 40 More Reasons to Hate Us by Inocon? You're more. Yeah.
Is that the one that has you have cancer, you're gay?
That's I Like It When You Die.
Okay.
A lot of classics on 40 More Reasons to Hate Us. It starts off with You're Just a Metal Band.
I just can't. I don't get it, dude. I can't do it.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. Most people that have frontal lobes would agree with you.
Which is actually thinking about the Social D album. I think Chuck was in the band. I don't think he's on that album. I don't think he plays on it. But I think he was maybe playing live with them after that. A really cool year. Not a good year for LA Guns and Warrant, kind of shit.
A lot of years Warrant in the 90s.
Fucking Ministry.
Yeah.
Definitely not very dark times for Danzig.
You know what's funny? We were going through. It's like a lot of these years, the early years that we do. It's like it's harder because we focus a lot on extreme stuff and underground stuff, and sometimes you have to pepper in like big classic rock albums.
I think
these later years are easy because like there's no good rock albums in '90s.
There's not, and when we do '92, there's going to be I think a lot more.
A lot more, yeah. '90s is going to be really hard because there's still you get kind of long '80s with that, and it's like kind of
yeah, absolutely. But when you get into like all of these years, you know, the later '90s, you're
more
getting
subgenres and stuff. Yeah,
you're getting way out of that, and it's more, you know, again, like I started moving towards, you know, Nevermore, Typo Negative, Ryan Christ.
We will talk about Third Eye Blind in '97. I can guarantee that because you don't like Third Eye Blind.
That's the year I graduated, and I can't.
You're white from the suburbs, and you don't like Third Eye Blind?
No.
It's appalling. Anyways, but
no.
All right. Well, you like Christmas too, or like birthday cake?
Yeah.
Or other things?
Yeah. I like no. That shit to me was. You know, so I hear it now, and it's crazy. Back then I thought it sucked so bad, but then I hear popular music now, and then somebody will play Third Eye Blind, and it'll sound like
up a notch by default.
It sounds like Deep Purple to me now compared to like the shit that's on the radio. So,
right.
So now it's like I don't hate it as much. There's still bands that I thought were.
They all of a sudden became budgy over time.
Like, yo, what is this, man? It sounds like Sabbath. They're like, actually, it's Sugar Ray. I'm like, oh, fuck that.
Oh man, but no, it was a fun year. I think '96 was a cool year. This was fun.
What are you gonna do for grindcore albums in '92? I'm sure you're gonna have a list.
I think I want to do a little thing. Speaking of how we did this, I want to have a little section in each year of these where I just lister through all the grind stuff in like a minute. I think that's a good way.
Well,
I think that's a classic way. I think that's a great homage to grindcore in the '90s. If I just do what I did this episode, where I just go through and blast through a bunch of grindcore releases and be like, those are the grindcore, and then it's almost like a 30-second song.
Yeah, there you go.
I think it's a great homage to the genre.
And, you know, one of the great things about '96, probably for you, but not so much for me, there's no Monster Magnet. I couldn't mention.
I'm surprised they have.
But I think '92.
They must have had an off year. They probably had something out.
'92.
Yeah.
Spine of God. So it's
which
coming.
is one of their best albums. So
you think that's their best?
I think that's one of their best ones.
No, it is.
Spine of God and Power Trip were always the ones I listened to the most. So I mean,
I'm gonna be able to. Maybe even 90. I can find something to throw them in there.
Put it away. You'll get a chance. But no, it's been a fun one. So.
Awesome. So.
90. Oh my God! Before I forget, because I forgot about '98, I totally forgot to mention Snakebite Love, which is everybody knows Motorhead, my favorite band.
What's '96? Overnight.
Overnight Sensation. I always forget to mention Motorhead in these because they just put out records and they're awesome. And what am I gonna say? Forgot about '98. Snakebite Love, great album, awesome. Overnight Sensation, first Motorhead back as a 3-piece, '96. So check it out.
Is it really quick? Local band, '96. Is it From the Depths?
From the Depths was also '96. I forgot about shout out to Matt Sorg and Arnie, our buddies. Again, if you like Roots, you'll love From the Depths. So.
Well, they're never going to talk about
Oh, if this is the one thing that's going to make them do that. But no, awesome year. So.
Got '92 coming up soon, and
yeah,
we'll just keep plugging away at the '90s. Then we go to the 1920s. It'll be great. So
yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
See you later.